such as Andrew Schmidt at Minnesota Beer Activists, the entire group at the Minnesota Craft Distillers Guild, those kind of folks. So what ended up happening was I started to get these connections in small businesses that were trying to open. So I had a series of different clerkships throughout law school that were all kind of government side work. But once I graduated law school, I graduated in 2013, which was another tough time to get jobs because there had just been a government freeze in hiring, and there were 4 law schools at the time graduating students. So a friend of mine and I, Jordan Novak, kind of partnered up and started working on small business licensing issues, drafting like employment contracts or operating agreements for businesses, mostly breweries and distilleries. So I became a beer lawyer, is basically what happened after law school.
Minnesota dream.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How many
that's
children
everybody's dream.
am I allowed to keep chained to the keg room under Minnesota law currently? Like,
Minnesota law, this is currently the limit does not exist. So
as many as I want.
I would advise you to consult with your attorney, but there,
So in
there
2
currently
years,
is not a specific law on that one.
but in
so.
2 years you'll be your own attorney. So
Right.
I mean, you can make your decisions by then, right?
Yeah, they do say it's a great idea to represent yourself in all matters, personal and
Absolutely.
business.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So that's kind of where my path went after law school. Other than that, while I was in law school, I clerked for the Appellate Public Defender's Office and for the Metropolitan Council's Office of General Counsel. So again, it was all really government side work, which I really enjoyed, but there weren't government side jobs when I graduated in 2013. Or there were, but there were 200 applicants at a time. So they weren't jobs that anyone was getting.
So you worked a lot during law school. Were these all paid jobs, or how did you go to school? How did you pay for school?
That's a good question. So the CIS internship was actually through school. I was getting credit for it. I worked part-time all through law school in various roles. I worked for like a hair salon for a while, worked at a restaurant for a while. I worked for a cosmetics retailer for a while. So I just kind of had my hands in a lot of different things and was always working.
Did Hamlet have a policy about it? I know some schools have. Like at the U, they used to say that you were not allowed to work.
Yeah, I knew that you had that. I don't think Hamlet had a policy on it.
Strong suggestions.
Yeah, maybe more of like an aspirational thing of make law school your focus, but
Yeah.
I don't think there was a written policy. If there was, I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I did aside from clerkships. The appellate public defender gig was a clinic at Hamlin Law at the time. So I did one semester just the clinic, and then the next semester I was one of the student directors of the clinic. So I was getting class credit for that as well as representing clients in appellate post-conviction motions. And then Met Council was a paid summer job between 2L and 3L year. And it was supposed to just be summertime, but they loved me so much that I stayed on until February. They also needed me very badly because my supervisor happened to be at a CLE out of state when this litigation that we had been involved in kind of blew up. And so I just knew everything about that litigation just because she was gone and not available. And so I learned as much as I could, and then I was indispensable. This is how to get a job, by the way. Just become
Good idea.
indispensable. So that long story doesn't tell you anything about why I'm a prosecutor. Why I'm a prosecutor? Why I'm a prosecutor is because so we had practiced for a while in small business law, working with breweries and distilleries, and my partner Jordan, he was kind of the business guy. He did the business law certificate at Hamlin and had done business for his undergrad. I don't remember where though, but he and his wife had decided time to settle down, raise kids. Small firm or freelancing life is not really helpful when you're trying to actually raise children and that sort of thing because you bring in the money that you make and that's it, which isn't a ton of money when you're working with very small businesses. So he actually left the practice of law altogether, and then I just started looking for jobs at that point. And I was applying widely to all kinds of different things, decided I did want to go back to government side work. Ended up randomly interviewing with the St. Cloud City Attorney's Office and was offered the job. And it was my first time on prosecution side. I'd clerked for the appellate public defender, so I, was somewhat versed in criminal procedure and evidence, although it was in the post-conviction realm. And so just kind of jumped into prosecution and have loved it and never looked back. And it's a job that I see myself prosecuting for a long time.
So what kind of prosecutions do you currently do right now? Is it really broad, or do you have a specific area that you really focus on?
That's a good question. So as an assistant city attorney for the city of St. Cloud, there's 4 of us that are prosecuting. The caseload, we've never really actually calculated out the caseload because probably if we did, we'd all quit. I would guess it's in the realm of 200 to 300 cases, each of us. We also have contracts to prosecute for the cities of Sartell and St. Joseph, so those get added into it too. I think it's either 9.5 or 10 judges now in Stearns County Court. St. Cloud lies in 3 counties, so we prosecute St. Cloud, Stearns, and then traffic misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors in St. Cloud Benton as well. So
did you say 9.5 to 10 judges?
Yeah, we had a part-time judge for a while.
Okay.
I think it's
Sorry,
actually,
sure.
I think it's full-time now, so I think it's 10.
I think that'd be a sweet job, a part-time judge.
Yeah,
you just
she was
always
going-
say you're a judge, and yet only have to work part-time.
Well, she was
Kinda
working
cool.
full-time. She was just part-time with our county, so she would be
Oh, okay.
part-time in Mille Lacs and part-time in
okay.
Stearns. So, unfortunately.
There goes-
She's still
There
just
goes-
as busy.
Unfortunately,
There
it's
goes
still
my
working just
future
as much.
job.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
Part-time judge.
So how do you manage
Not
that
really.
workload with juggling 200, 300 cases at a time?
Most of us just live in denial to get through it. It's really, with work like this, you can really only focus on so much at one time. So, for example, today I wrote a brief that's due next Friday because I'm going to be out of the office next Friday. That's all that I can think about at one time, and so that's just how I do it. I try to prep cases ahead as much as I can. I have a jury trial set next Tuesday and Wednesday, and so I've been kind of working that up while I'm doing court appearances during the week. But there's only so far you can work ahead because by Friday this case is probably going to resolve. I'm guessing it's a pretty good case, but there's no use for me putting all my time toward prepping this jury trial when it's not going to happen. It's just not a good use of time. So one of the most valuable skills you will learn in law school that your teachers will not believe is valuable at this point, it is later in life, is learning to prepare things really quickly at the last minute and be very thorough. And
We're set. Yeah.
Perfect.
So-
Practicing
Last
all my
minute.
life.
Yes.
go ahead and don't tell your professors you got that from me. But that's really what practice is, especially if you're working in a fast-paced criminal prosecution position. Especially for like in custody hearings, I get the file the second that the ticket is handed to court, which may be the minute the person is walking in the door for their arraignment. So I'm not always guaranteed to have read the police reports before I have to make a bail argument, so I have to figure out how to scan the police reports really quickly to get the information I need to make an effective bail argument. And if I miss something, I miss something, but
So how
the
do you-
faster you can
yeah.
work, the better.
How do you
it
manage
is.
the stress levels? There's a lot on the line for these criminals that are coming in. So, when you have a prosecution who has to juggle 200 or 300
Yep.
cases, do you ever feel like you're not giving adequate? I guess not. I wouldn't say adequate, but you know what I mean, giving 100% for each case that walks through
Right.
the door.
So, when you say there's a lot on the line, there is and there isn't, because as a city prosecutor, I only prosecute misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, and only certain gross misdemeanors. So, gross misdemeanor traffic occurring in the city, some gross misdemeanor non-traffic offenses like trespass or theft, for example, we'll prosecute those. It really depends. Gross misdemeanors really depend on what the statute says or what joint powers agreements we have with the counties that we prosecute for. So there is a lot on the line because obviously my cases matter to me and they matter to the city, they matter to the police that are out there giving the tickets and everything. But no one's getting a life prison sentence over a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor. So even in the case where I'm not ready on a bail argument and I miss something, that's just today's bail argument, and we can maybe get it added at the next hearing. a lot of times the hardest cases for me are with assault cases. We don't have the time to contact victims the same way that counties do, because counties have a lot more resources to deal with victim coordination and witness coordination. We don't have the time for that, and so a lot of times we'll lose contact with victims. They'll change their numbers or move or whatever. I won't be able to subpoena them, and then an assault case goes away. And that's, to me, that's bothersome, because that's a public safety issue as well as an issue between those two individuals that were involved in the actual assault. But it's not always possible to stay on top of tracking people down, especially when then you finally manage to contact them and they don't want to press charges anymore anyway. So you can only get so married to each individual case and let it bother you so much, because, like I said, there's 199 other cases out there to get after. So.
When you started as a prosecutor, did it bother you a lot more than it does now?
No, I wouldn't say so.
If there was an assault that happened like early on when you were an early, very young prosecutor, would that just really burn you inside? Whereas now you kind of are starting to realize, okay, this kind of happens over and over, and it's more like this is how the
desensitized to
a
it.
little more desensitized to some of those things.
I would say no, because especially with assault cases, they kind of fall on two sides of a line, where it's either a really clear case of assault where you have some piece of evidence that makes it so clear that it's an assault, whether it's an admission from the defendant or a video of it occurring, that it's almost guaranteed not to go to trial, right? Because there's some piece of something that you can bring into court and say this was assault. So that's one type of case. The other type of case is where it's a little less clear cut. Maybe there's a valid self-defense claim. Maybe there was alcohol involved. Maybe there was bad blood or something. The same victim in this one had assaulted the defendant in a prior case, for example, where it is still probably an assault, but you can settle it for something different or work out a more creative result where it still ends up without a trial. Right. 99% of the time we're not going to trial on every case, because there's other ways to settle things that make everybody happy. And it's trying not to die on the hill of needing one specific thing out of a case that helps you settle cases. So not dying on the hill of, oh, I need this person to serve jail time, or I need this person to do this type of assessment or programming. If you can work with, we have a very friendly defense bar. We have to work with them every day. We have the same 4 misdemeanor public defenders that we work with pretty much every day. And so when we can kind of have that same conversation, knowing that we're going to work stuff out, we're going to try to make everyone as happy as we can, cases tend to settle rather than go to trial. And so in that way, I don't feel burned about those cases, because I could take it to trial, but if it's a matter of like 5 jail days, for example, we can't spend a day in trial just battling over 5 jail days. It's going to be more likely something that settles with 0 jail days, and then we end up dealing with it post-conviction instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so do you ever deal with private defenders that are maybe very, very aggressive in cases, or is it usually fairly collegial and everything, and you still are able to work it out pretty well? Or does it really depend on the defense attorney? It
does depend on the defense attorney. The ones that we work with that are in Stearns County and know kind of what types of resolutions we offer and what types of things we do, we have very collegial relationships with them, and they kind of know coming into it what their client is going to be looking at, which is great. When we get a defense attorney from outside of the area, it's a little bit harder, because they don't know that we don't offer certain things, or that we have a particular practice in the county that we use, and that can make it more difficult. But usually everyone is still friendly enough that I've never had like an knockdown, drag out fight with a defense attorney where we can't agree on anything. It's usually something where they just don't understand why we do it the way we do it, and it's probably a particular reason for the fact that like we prosecute the same city in 2 counties, for example. And so once they realize the reasons behind that, it's usually easy to still get resolutions out of cases.
When you look at the demographics of those who are coming in after being ticketed by the police or something like that, do you feel like